Just doing the sound check. Can everyone hear me okay? Yes? Okay, great. Would you like to begin? All right. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today in the Ocean Pavilion at COP29 in the Blue Zone. My name is Eugene Montoya. I'm a sustainable finance advisor to the Waterfront Alliance. We are a climate resilience nonprofit dedicated to the focus of the water's edge, the human-built environment, and its relationship to water. We started with coastal resilience, and we've quickly expanded into freshwater resilience now, verifying that sites are both resilient, ecologically responsible, and community accessible. Today's session is focused on the Italian Institute for Environmental Protection and Research, ISPRA, which is investing in a holistic approach to mapping, modeling, and monitoring seagrass around Italy as part of their Marine Ecosystem Restoration Project, MER. This session will explore how project partners are creating fit-for-purpose digital representations of marine habitats, integrating ecological status and physical properties to inform sustainable marine space use via intuitive digital tools and local stakeholder engagement. If I may, I'd like to do a quick introduction to my esteemed panelists. I have here Robert from Fugro, who is a project lead focused on this particular project, focused on the sustainable modeling and mapping of a digital rendering of the seagrass of the entire country of Italy. And we also have Margaret from Scripps, who is on the scientific side, lending expertise and knowledge layers about the effectiveness of this type of modeling exercise. On the line, I hope we also have Giordano from the ISPRA itself, and I hope that he's connected now and we can see him, or he can hear us, or we can hear him. Fantastic, I think we see you. Don't know if we hear you yet, but hopefully that'll come across in just a moment. So the first thing I guess I would like to talk a little bit about, what is marine habitat mapping and why is it useful? Well, the first part of this is that we're actually taking the best of our data and analytics to understand the natural environment and to understand that, the oceans, which are a very dynamic place, have baselines of ecological health, their relationship to human activities. You can think about this from many, many perspectives, from sustainable tourism to the maritime sector, shipping, containers. All of the different industries that are very active at the water's edge have an ecological impact on the natural assets that underlie them. Additionally, we as humans have a dependency on the health of those natural systems in order to complete our activities, which include economic activity, value creation, commerce, tourism, and of course our health with air quality and water quality. So to take an example like this and to focus on conservation and restoration are just some of the benefits of understanding the seagrass and its current condition. Additionally, there are other revenue streams that can be activated, things like blue carbon, where the seagrass's restoration can actually directly participate in the derivatives market and environmental attribute certificates. There's also a heavy impact on biodiversity, restoring the native ecology and the native biodiversity of the ecosystem within all of Italy's marine aquatic environments. And then even beyond that, going back to what I was mentioning about the commercial value, how we depend on seagrass for so much of the everyday activities that are somewhat unknown to us, but they're very much ubiquitous. So with that, I'd like to start with the first question for Giordano. Could you provide some more context to this groundbreaking marine ecosystem restoration project? How did it come about? What are the objectives? What challenges have you encountered to get this project running, and how have you addressed them?
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, the main object of this project, Marine Ecosystem Restoration, that is the leading project in Italy for marine environment, was to reverse the trend of degradation that we are facing in the Mediterranean Sea. So Italy has more than 8,000 kilometers of coastline, and so this type of environment is crucial for protecting biodiversity, for economic development, and we are facing many different challenges that are coastal erosion, that is a leading issue for us. We are sea level rise that are causing many types of stresses on our coastlines. We are facing the introduction of alien species, and we are facing climate change impact effects on our coastlines. So the object of this project was to do something, not only to monitoring, but also to reverse this type of trend. So we have acquired a funding that was really impressive, because it is a project of more than 400 million euros, and for a little country like Italy is something that is impressive. It's more than was spent in the last 30 years. And the object is to restore some types of habitats, in particular seagrass meadows, but also to enforce our network of observations. It means buoys, coastal buoys that also measure currents and winds and, of course, waves. But also we are acquiring a new research vessel that is dedicated to the Mediterranean Sea, and is actually adapt to have a remote operating vehicles that can operate with more than 3,000, 4,000 meters depth that we have in our seas. But the most important things actually is the mapping of our coastlines, because these not only have the objective to have a mapping of the seagrass meadows, but also all the topographic and the morphobathymetric data that are essential for our countries in order to face coastal erosion and sea level rise and flooding. We have many actually coastal floodings in the last decades, and they cause distractions, and also they cause economic damages to our coastal communities. So marine ecosystem restoration is something that we are proud of, and it was very difficult to carry on this type of project because we have had to make many tenders, so many bureaucratic burden was also included in this, but we actually are facing. And the other issue is the timeline, because we have to conclude these projects by 30 June of 2026. And this was really challenging, because we have to make in 4 years, because we started in the 2022, what we didn't make in the last 30 or 50 years. Of course, our project was based in all the experiences that we have actually collected during our experiences, not only as our institute, but also other research institutes in Italy that are collaborating with us. But I think that we have actually we are on the right way to match our objectives, and so we could say that at this point we are satisfied of what are the point that we are.
Thank you so much for that. I think this is really an incredible and tremendous effort by the country of Italy to understand its impacts and dependencies on the natural assets that really line its coast. I know, for example, in my home state of Florida, we have 7 species of seagrass. I think there's 52 maybe globally, and they play a very critical role in water clarity, in capturing sediment, in coral, in morphology, as Giordano mentioned, and of course this use of digital technology to really understand the baselines and to understand what kind of interventions could we actually make in spatial terms. And of course, he also mentions the fact that there's temporal considerations. There's both acute extreme weather events that are affecting the population of Italy on the coastlines, as well as more chronic issues like sea level rise and pollution and contamination and other effects that bring human health and safety into consideration. I'd like to turn now to Robert to talk about a bit more if you could share with us, Robert, what are the innovative technologies and methodologies being used to do the mapping and the monitoring? And specifically, how are they really enabling higher accuracy and scalability of this type of endeavor?
Does this work? Yeah,
yes.
It works.
Thank you.
So I will answer that question, but I would first like to talk a little bit about the power of geodata in this forum, because I think it's important that that we all understand why we need geodata to make informed decisions, because I think ISPRA is a key example of that, and I think Giordano said that as well. To be able to reverse the degradation, to be able to inform us on our blue economy and on our economy, we need to have the data. Recently I was in one of the small island development states in the Caribbean, and there you see the same problem that we're all facing: sea level rise and coastal erosion. And I think what we saw there as well is that by very simple measures, there can already be a sort of understanding of what that erosion is like, and then there's an informed decision that can be made for the type of programs that you need to do, and eventually those programs need to look like the ISPRA program. So if we go to the technology that's used in the ISPRA program, so Fugro is a company. We've been mapping the ocean for 60 odd years, so we're using all kinds of technology to do so. We provide the technology for Giordano and his team as well. We're fortunate enough to do 2 projects for ISPRA. One is the Met-Ocean observing system that we're providing, and one is the Seagrass mapping project. I think what makes the Seagrass mapping project so interesting is because it's a multi-skill project. So we're using satellite-derived bathymetry, we're using airborne LiDAR bathymetry, we're using subsurface validation of the biodiversity and the seagrass health. We're creating a full morphology and topology of the environment. And I think the key of this is not so much applying the technologies, but really to merge all this data into one comprehensive data set that will inform Giordano and his team to move forward. So that's me. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I think that you make a great point that just really baselining the data is a huge endeavor on its own, from which so much more can be studied and explored and then evaluated for intervention and for strategies for the country of Italy or for its coastal communities to think about the health of biodiversity, the health of marine ecosystems, and absolutely this brilliant combination of aerial sensors as well as in situ water-based sensors. This combination is very much in line with a lot of the innovation we're seeing in the climate action space, as well as nature and water and ocean action. If I may, I'd like to turn to Margaret. How does integrating ecological status and physical properties into digital representations of marine habitats improve our understanding and management of these ecosystems? Could you provide some examples of how the integration works and how it's informing the sustainable marine space use?
Sure. Do you have the slides?
Oh. I don't know if we do, but maybe we'll give the tech team a moment to look into it. In the meantime, if you'd like to start with an answer, that would be fine.
Okay.
Apologies there.
Let me start by saying that the entire seagrass ecology community around the world is extremely excited about this project, because it is the only project that has taken a comprehensive point of view for seagrass around an entire country. And the local shallow water environments around Italy vary considerably from northern Italy, which has far more effects downstream toward estuaries from the mountains and from freshwater runoff, compared to shallower water areas. So there are a wide range of nearshore environments and estuarine environments that are being covered by this, a wide range of techniques for characterizing the seagrass, and a wide range of oceanic environments that are impinging on them. And that together gives people an ability to look across all of those environments at many aspects of the ecology that are important for modeling. So Giordano emphasized some of the things that are coming to face Italy and will face all of our seagrass environments, sea level rise especially, but secondly, changes in runoff with precipitation and changes in temperature. All of those require that seagrass ecologists be able to put their data into models and tell the coastal managers around them what's going to happen in the future. How are seagrasses going to be affected by sea level rise? How are they going to be affected by temperature? And how are they going to be affected by precipitation, runoff, and salinity? So one of the big difficulties with modeling seagrass is how complicated that environment is. So you're talking about most seagrasses are very strongly affected by the tides, and they're affected in different ways depending on the species and depending on the height of the seagrass. So and those are critical because they control how much erosion is taking place during tidal cycles, and whether they are there, wonderful, and whether the seagrasses are going to be stable. And you have the
Oh yes,
answer.
here you go. I have a follow-on question to that, but I'd love for you to dive into your presentation.
There we go. So this gives you a sense of the many different types of mapping that are taking place from in situ measurements and remote sensing measurements, as Robert talked about. And my understanding from the project is that you're using virtually all of these. That in itself is amazing. I mean, most seagrass mapping is done with one or maybe two techniques, but to be able to put all of this together to make those sorts of maps is extraordinary. And here are a couple of the examples that Robert mentioned: in situ measurement, as well as you talked about using LiDAR, but this is side scan sonar from shallow water in order to get the distribution. But then we come to the challenge of understanding how to model this. And you have wave interactions from the water body together with tidal changes, which are changing that flow regime and the wave interactions constantly through the tidal cycle. Light availability is also critical and is controlled not only by the depth of water and the clarity of the water with respect to pollutants, but also the light availability related to circulation and whether sediment is being stirred up. And then sediment feedbacks in terms of the seagrass. And then you have different scales that are operating at different stages of the tidal cycle. So individual plants control a lot of what happens at very low tide, while patches and meadows, and then the estuary itself, control more of what's happening at high tide. So this is an incredibly rich and difficult system to measure in and to model. And this is going to be a little hard to see, but what shows is the number of studies that have included vertically all of those parameters in the modeling. So temperature is the long line down at the bottom. More than 45 different modeling studies of seagrass have included temperature. And bathymetry comes next, light availability, salinity. So those very basic things, lots of people are including in models. Then you get to some of the things that are really critical for the talked about, like the sediment and sediment characteristics. And sediment characteristics are number 2 at the top there, and you can see that less than 5 modeling studies have actually included that parameter. So, and then some of the basic ones, tidal energy there, only 10 modeling studies have included this parameter. So one of the big challenges is going to be to put all of that data together and start generating models that include all of these. Why is that so important? Because we've talked about the sustainability of the systems and our ability to predict them from the future for the future. And if we haven't included some of those basic parameters, we're not going to be able to say what will happen as seagrasses or as the seagrass environment is inundated by sea level rise. Another really critical point for modeling is the ability to understand whether or not seagrasses are a great or an effective instrument for blue carbon sequestration, which we've talked a lot about at the Ocean Pavilion over the years and is being discussed a lot in terms of natural blue carbon solutions. The challenge here is that we're beginning to see, as we look at different seagrass environments, that the sequestration capability there varies by as much as an order of magnitude from one seagrass meadow to the next. So our ability to say how much carbon is sequestered depends on the location, it depends on the species. And then we're finding that even within a seagrass estuary, that the sequestration can vary from area to area within the estuary by as much as an order of magnitude. So our ability to say how much carbon is being sequestered in a seagrass meadow is going to depend on our ability to understand what controls that variability and how that will change with time. And that's why a project like this one is so important, because it's looking across all of those variables, and it offers us the opportunity to start including these things in the models in ways that we've never been able to do before.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, that's... Oh, Robert, if you'd like to come in, please.
Yeah, I would like to comment. Thank you, Margaret, for telling us about the science, and it's very insightful. And I just to add to that, so in ISPRA, in the ISPRA Seagrass project, we use 11 technologies together. So those are the amount of technologies. And what is important for us as well is to use that fundamental academic research that has been done over the years and scale it. So obviously, typically that research has been done on small scale. Italy is large scale, but we also need to do this at a far larger scale and replicate it from one country to the next. And to your point that seagrass sequestration is different in different areas of the world, but even in a certain area, this is why we're doing in-ground sampling. And we're trying to elevate that to scalable technologies. So we make use of a lot of partners, a lot of startups as well that have smart ideas. And then what we're doing as a corporate environment is try to scale that to make sure that we can do it everywhere in the world, and we can do it for a countrywide challenge.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yes, exactly. And that is why this project is so complex. It's so challenging, and they've taken on the whole piece of it. It's really a remarkable effort and a remarkable contribution to our understanding of the response of seagrass to both climate change and its potential for blue carbon.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that's fascinating. I did have some follow-on questions from before. For example, maybe for the audience's knowledge or edification, if we could know a little bit more about how seagrass plays a structural role in really supporting the ecosystem I know there's something to do with its deep roots and its ability to kind of maintain. I know it's also a source of food for different marine species. Certainly, it's a habitat. It's a place of living. But this relationship between the seagrass and the epipelagic, the top level of the ocean, not just on light conduction but temperature conduction. It seems like we're just starting to scratch at the surface of understanding the relevance of that, especially as we have warmer waters and more effects, such as where I live with, coral bleaching, which, can in some cases be, human induced with, like, for example, in Miami, we have parking lots that are near the water's edge that pour hot water into the coral itself and kill it. This happens in rivers, this happens in other places. So could you talk a little bit more about what the reliance we really have on the seagrass? It seems like such a simple and soft thing, but actually it's maintaining quite a lot of the structure and the fundamentals of ocean health beyond maybe it's overperforming based on its mass and its consistency. That'd be great to hear a bit more of your take on that.
Yeah, and a lot of that is because of the root system, as you said, and that root system has to endure the changing of the tide, which completely changes the flow over it, but it's evolved to be able to do that, and that evolution is one of the that evolution to deep root systems is one of the things that we're counting on for seagrass with sea level rise, that it will happen slowly enough so that it's able to and hang on to the sediment. The amount and structure of the roots for seagrass also controls the effectiveness of it for carbon sequestration. And some of what we see in the variability of blue carbon over a particular seagrass bed has to do exactly with the root structure, and that in turn has been controlled by the health of the seagrass itself. So when it is not able to get a lot of nutrients, it invests most of them in the top part of the mass because that's where it gets light and that's where it can grow. But if it doesn't get enough, then the root structure is less, and so its ability to hang on becomes more tenuous.
And you also mentioned that the seagrass is one natural asset that might be working with other natural assets like mangroves and coral, salt marsh. I'm just curious if you could share maybe any experience there with the cross reliance on these different elements in a marine aquatic environment that really support the natural adaptation of these assets against climate change, which could be sea level rise or temperature stress. Or even contamination and the tampering, human tampering with the upwelling process. I'm curious if there's really if there's ways that this study might eventually illuminate other natural restoration conservation efforts on different assets that might have a reliance on seagrass as well. If that's something that's maybe been very, very scratched on the surface.
You don't want much, do you?
Yeah.
I don't have the answers to all of those questions. I think one of the primary ones, other than sea level rise, that we're concerned about is response to temperature and warming. So most of the grasses have light and temperature as a primary variable in terms of the distribution of those species around the world. And one of the big questions is how quickly the ocean is warming, and whether there's enough time for the seagrass to evolve to the in response.
Yep, I think we might switch into a different mic just to make it a bit smoother. But thank you. That's actually very helpful. So we'd like to open it up to the full panel now to talk a little bit more about the role of funding and financing in all of these efforts, not just what ISPRA is doing to contribute to humanity and understanding a very non-understood part of the ocean, but also the role that these large-scale programs can play and the strategies that they can really unlock. There's certainly a lot of cost that goes into this level of data modeling, but there's a lot of benefit as well. The question is, when will we realize those benefits and who will benefit from it? So if anyone on the panel, including Giordano, would like to comment a bit on the funding part, not just on the research, but also thinking ahead to the use cases. How will non-state entities use this information? Will we, as you've mentioned, you're creating a very comprehensive model to understand a system itself, all the variables, and trying to think about all the moving parts and which ones we can actually intervene, the balances between them. How do we actually create a holistic understanding to actually create the right effects that we want in the right sequence, really? And as you mentioned, there is urgency. So I'd love to hear from you all on a bit more profile on the funding and for this work, and maybe some of the natural off-takers that you can envision already based on what you're seeing.
Well, first of all, this type of project actually teaches us a lesson. And the lesson is that we have very complex systems, and you need a big funding operation. Otherwise, if you spend very little, of course it's worth spending, but the risk is that you actually cannot get to the objectives. In Italy, we needed this integral whole mapping of all coastal of Italy. So we just didn't need some specific areas to be mapped, but we need an integral mapping of coastline of Italy. And this actually requires big funding. So how can we assure that this type of funding will be also available in the future? Because of course now we make this mapping in 2 years, but the ecosystems and the morphology of the coastline is changing and will change again. So we will have to make this mapping and to update this type of information. And actually what we are thinking about is that the seagrass is now, and the protection of seagrass is not anymore only an environmental issue, but it's also a national security issue. Because the coastal erosions in a country like Italy means that if we have this type of flooding, we have this type of infrastructure damages, and most of the transport lines in Italy actually are on the coastlines, we have a problem of national security, meaning all the critical infrastructures that we have. I can make you an example about the Adriatic Sea. We have had this huge flooding in the last months, and we have had problems in the transport lines of Adriatic coastline, and half of the countries, or a quarter of the countries, was actually split in two parts, and we couldn't make transport of peoples, of goods, and so on. The other issue that requires specific attention is the alien species distribution and invasion. In Italy, the blue crabs is actually it's actually devastating many areas of the Adriatic Sea. And if you have seagrass meadows, or actually coastal habitats that are functioning in a proper ways, these can actually make they can actually obstaculate the distribution of invasive alien species. That is also another issue of great importance. So actually what we are looking for to assure a proper funding of this type of initiatives is that we have to link what are the environmental issues with economic issues, with actually what can become a national security issue. Because we are talking about, in a country like Italy, coastal lines and coastal infrastructures are critical infrastructures. And we have actually see that if you do not have anymore this type of habitats like seagrass meadows in the medium term, but the medium term now is something very different between the medium term of 30 to 50 years ago. Medium term now is 5 years. So we are actually experimenting this type of climate change impacts and climate change scenarios that are actually much more quick that we could imagine in the past years. We have experimented in Adriatic Sea four big flooding events just in the last 3 years. And we didn't have this type of events in the last 30 to 50 years. So the process is becoming much more quick than we could imagine. And so the protection and the mapping of this type of habitats has to be also quicker. And we have to assure this type of funding and the type of strategy that we are putting in place is to put around the table all the actors and all the issues that are involved. CO2 sequestration is also another type of issue that we are facing in Italy because to acquire climate neutrality, we are a country that also has a need from gas and from other type of fossil fuels in the future. So actually the CO2 sequestration of this type of habitats also play a roles in the climate neutrality strategy that we are going to apply. So all this type of things that comes from transport, from energy, for environmental issues, and also for health issues are all around to make possible to assure this type of funding in the future. You cannot count only on the environmental actors in order to assure this type of funding. And this is something that is the consequence of the fact that the type of degradation of this type of habitats is at a level now with the climate change that are increasing and ongoing. This type of things affects many points of our societies and of our economy. So we are going to face this type of problems to actually scale up the problem and to involve the more actors that is possible on this type of initiative.
Thanks. Thanks so much for that. And it really resonates. Oh, sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. It really resonates with me as well because I work with a lot of maritime sector corporates that have large, coastal assets, and they're very concerned with disruption that they're, starting to experience, uninsurability, simply resource inefficiency and unsustainability of their operations. And they're starting to understand more the dependence we have on nature and the health of natural systems, including seagrass. This is definitely becoming an area, but I have to agree with you that there's urgency. There's also a somewhat of a discomfort from the funding and financing community with the fact that the data is so active and dynamic that we can't create linear solutions, that we have to kind of reassess, recalibrate, understand the prioritization of what's coming out of these studies and how we actually want to intervene. Additionally, nature-based solutions or natural assets, natural markets have tried to create financial value of restoration activities and create credits, which can create financial revenue for projects to support the research, but in some ways also separate them from what you're talking about, which is conventional business. If I'm thinking about maintaining my assets on the coastline, I need to integrate this into my considerations, my cost benefit, my risk return for how I use my capital. We need to not separate climate action from conventional finance because to do so is continuing to put a burden of profitability on things that simply have no experience with that. There are no cash flows for mangroves, corals, and seagrass, but there is data that's showing us that we depend on their health to complete our economic objectives over terms that we understand. I'd love to hand it over to Robert as well if you want to come in on the funding piece, and certainly to Margaret before we wrap up with our last question for the panel.
Yeah, so I think a lot was said, and I want to thank Giordano for this edition, because it can't be said enough that Italy is a lighthouse in this, and the speed in which they're doing it is unbelievable. I think it's a gift that keeps on giving, and you'll see that the amount of applications that Giordano already mentioned. I'm also thinking, as you said, Eugene, about insurance companies. This is where we're also delivering this type of data for tourism, fisheries. Will all benefit from the data that's currently being collected. But the point for sustained funding into the future is the most important point, something we spoke about in the last panel as well, and something that historically we've seen missing. So I really hope that the Italian government can continue building those business cases to continue to show that you need to keep that data updated, as Giordano said, because the coastline is continuously changing. One question to Giordano back. Obviously, Fugro and a lot of people here in this room and in the community want to replicate this model elsewhere. What is the biggest lessons learned so far from the Italian project that you would give to your neighboring countries or other countries in the world?
Well, first of all, and I think it was previously also mentioned by you, is the fact that in order to get to this type of objective, you have to use simultaneously many technologies and tools in order to get to the point. So remote sensing is not enough. Autonomous unmanned vehicles are not enough. LiDAR in itself is not enough, and so on. So you have to use many technologies, but also, and this is also another point that I want to highlight, is the fact that you have to use many types of technologies, but you also have to integrate them in a dynamic and a digital systems that get you to the point. Because if you make and you use all these technologies, but you actually are not able to integrate them, actually you also do not get to the point. So you need to use simultaneously, but you need to have the ability to integrate and also to choose where is more necessary to use AUV, or where is more necessary to calibrate and validate, where is more necessary to also stress on remote sensing. So it's something that you need to have a dynamic systems in terms of the operation of this type. You have to adapt also. So in some areas, I repeat, you can have that LiDAR is sufficient, that airborne flight are sufficient, but in other areas you do not have this. So you actually have the ability to use these technologies simultaneously, and also the ability to integrate them and to adapt them to the different type of areas. Our coastlines is very complex. Some is low, some is rocky, and so on. We have many different types of coastlines, and to map all together this type of habitats and coastlines, you need all of these. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that. And Dr. Leinen, would you like to come in to talk about the funding? No? Oh, okay. All right. Very good. Well, there's one last question before we open it up, and we'd love to get maybe a question or two from the audience about this exciting project that has so much value to offer to the world. So Robert, I'm curious about the biodiversity layer of the work, understanding more how biodiversity metrics and information are being integrated into the project, and really what the purpose, coming in on the design side with that is.
Yeah, and I'm not going to do a whole lecture on it. I'm not the expert on it either. But I think what you already heard from Dr. Leinen's presentation is that biodiversity. So actually, climate is relatively straightforward from a measurement point of view. It's either the parameter of CO2, it's dimensional if you talk about sea level rise or about morphology. But when you look into biodiversity, it becomes extremely complex. Because every species or every ecosystem is different in the sense of the makeup of the abundance of species or the quality of species, the health of species, and the impact of them on each other. So what we're doing, and we're learning in the process as well, and we're learning on this project as well. So part of the project is also a discovery and experimentation with some very fundamental technologies and some new technologies that we're applying subsurface for the seafloor that we're testing and that we're then scaling up with our, for example, underwater vehicles. So these are some of the things that we're doing, and we will report out as we go along in the project.
Yeah, I think biodiversity is such an interesting topic, not only because of the creation of these metrics, these KPIs, these KRIs, to really understand the health of species in their relationship to their native habitats, but also the migration of species that is occurring, especially in places like the ocean. It's quite incredible, and of course, seagrass plays a critical role in stabilizing, the shoreline. It stabilizes the ability for the aquatic species to thrive. But then again, the biodiversity credits, there are people out in this COP and beyond in the world trying to figure out ways to value nature, to put financial value behind it, to make it an investable asset. But it also captures a lot of data, to create these credits, to actually take a baseline and a progress and measure the success against some kind of standard, even if it's a moving standard, which is very challenging, has value directionally to provide us to know that we're going in the right direction, that we're restoring baselines to places where we could, within a margin, within some kind of range, say that we're actually contributing to the reverse of these negative outcomes.
Yeah, so maybe to add to that, so we have different technologies to either assess species using eDNA, using hyperspectral type of cameras, and then the endeavor or the challenge is to scale that, to use AI to automatically assess from the images and from the data that we acquire, and that happens on the back of this project.
It's also quite interesting that biodiversity in many ways helps us understand the health of the habitat, the restoration of their population counts, the health of samples. We understand that we are having a positive impact on making it nurturing and positive for biodiversity to exist. So with the time remaining, if it's all right with the panelists, we'd like to open it up to Q&A. So this is an opportunity to have a two-way conversation about these issues. We're delighted for you all to... I think we have a roving mic coming around, and I believe we have a first question right there. Thank you.
Thank you. Have you or can you apply this technology for modeling and monitoring of the seaweed, macroalgae? No?
I do know we have solutions for seaweed, but I don't know if it's exactly these solutions that we present here. So I need to come back to you on that. Or maybe you want to add something to that, or?
There are some elements of the modeling that are a little more difficult because in the seagrass meadows, you pretty much have access to the entire plant, and so you can look at all of the aspects of its growth. Seaweed's a little different. Most of the, especially commercial seaweed, is much deeper. You can't use remote techniques, so it's not that it's impossible or that you couldn't do it, but it's much bigger. The mapping.
It's deeper, and the life cycle of the seaweed is much shorter than the seagrass, so maybe that could be another challenge.
Thank you. Yeah, right to the left there. Thank you. Make sure to get to you.
I got a quick question. I think I can make answer from the Giordano maybe. I'm curious about that. Margaret just mentioned the carbon sequestration of seagrass. Now, have you try to get this quantification data to reach out to the NDC or the greenhouse gases inventory of your country of the seagrass?
Giordano, let me know if you heard that, and if you need, I can play it back to you.
Yes, partially. So if you could repeat
Sure.
the question.
Sure. I believe if I'm getting the question correct, it's how does this effort around the Seagrass project relate to the nationally determined contributions for Italy? Has there been any interlinkage with the carbon account at the national scale, at the national level? Any interaction or connection there?
Well, actually, as you know, the emission trading system at the moment is not actually making an accountability of the seagrass sequestration of CO2. But thanks to this type of mapping, we will have some specific and precise data that we are going to use in order to include this type of habitats in the emission trading system at the EU level. So there are actually contacts in this time between the environmental ministry and the development economic ministry in Italy in order to include this type of indicator of CO2 sequestration in the emission trading system. For Italy, this is something that is crucial because these type of habitats actually are able to sequestrate a huge amount of CO2. And also the project, the Marine Ecosystem Project, we actually foresee the restoration of area of seagrass meadows in Italy. And we are doing this also with the objective to make possible CO2 sequestration. So the answer is that we are dealing at the legislation level how to include this type of accountability on CO2 sequestration by seagrass meadows in the ATS system.
Thank you so much. I believe we had another question over here.
Thank you. Interesting. Can you elaborate even a little more on the funding? You mentioned 400 million to do this. Where does that money come from? It's not like helicopter money from like European Union, or where does it come from? It would be great to understand. And also, what is the expected returns if you build up your business case around it?
Thank you.
Well, actually, the 400 million funding is for all marine ecosystem restoration project. So about 1/10 of these is dedicated to the coastal mapping. And this type of funding comes from the National Resilience and Recovery Plan that we have in Italy. And this type of plan is made with the aid of European Community funding. But I want to stress one thing, that most of the resources of the National Recovery and Resilience Plan actually comes from member states. So it's not something that was actually all on the burden of the European level country. It was something that the member states put together, all together, in order to fund the national recovery and resilience plan of each member state. In any case, this type of funding will end in June 2026. And so, as I mentioned before, we need to go on, and this type of new funding will come from national funding. And the strategy to do that is what I mentioned before. You need to actually enlarge the field of the issue that we are facing. So it's not only an issue of conservation of biodiversity, but it's also an issue about protection of coastal infrastructures and also the issue to assure financial sustainability for all the companies that are investing on our coastlines. So, in this regard, the climate change effect is something that is bad because it's actually making a stress on our system, but just because it's making this stress, it means that more actors are involved in this process, and so more actors are something that can found this type of initiative that are not only on the biodiversity conservation aim.
Yeah, and if I could just add, I work with the Climate Bonds Initiative on the resilience taxonomy. We're trying to figure out how to create resilient debt capital that has natural features in it, things that could come out of this study as the data stabilizes, as the data becomes more compelling, more integratable for senior decision makers in the capital markets and banking. We can figure out a way to take this massive investment that Italy has really put into the world and see if we can downscale it into corporate action for people who are concerned with the erosion of natural assets and their reliance and dependency on them. Maybe some last words before we wrap up, I think, or maybe we have time for just one more quick question. Thank you so much.
I would like to ask about seagrass. There is some certain type of seagrass that before growing in a certain area, there is another seagrass will grow before it. For example, for a case of Posidonia oceanica, there is a certain type of seagrass will grow is called Cimodosia, and we know after there is this certain type of seagrass growing, eventually after a couple of years we'll see another seagrass which we usually focus on growing. Is that taken in consideration or not? And as well, another question, if invasive species are taken in consideration in, for example, modeling or other things.
Thank you. We'll take those briefly and then we have to wrap up. So final answer, if someone from the panel will be willing to respond.
It's really a question for Giordano. I don't know whether they're doing that.
Sure thing. Giordano, will pass it to you.
Yes, in the our activity of marine ecosystem restoration, we also envisage the restoration of Cimodocia. So we know that there is also a shift in the actually a succession of species in the actually coastal habitats. So where it's more appropriate to start with Cimodocia, we start with it, and where we can actually face a restoration of Posidonia, we actually get into this type of habitats. But the mapping that we are doing with all the information on morphobathymetry and the typology and substrate of coastal is of crucial importance in order to choose the right species to start with in a restoration activity.
Thank you so much. Well, on behalf of everyone here today, the Ocean Pavilion, we'd like to thank everyone for the generosity to sponsor this event and this brilliant panel. Thank you, all of you, for attending, and we look forward to staying in good touch with you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Giordano. Take care.